Hello, everyone. My name is Leila Ahmed, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. I would like to introduce myself. I am a co-reacher, also known as a person that works in co-reach. And my main role in co-reach is basically digital solution finder, which is to always make sure co-reach is we're doing our best digitally and we're always finding and innovating in the world of technology. Allow me to introduce who we are. CoReach is the first coaching firm and platform in Saudi Arabia, a group of passionate advocates for bringing the human element back to the world. We thrive by enabling the reculture in organizations through providing a different approach to thinking, communicating, working, and living. And we believe in the power of teams and psychological safety. And that's why we let go of the hierarchical system and turned CoReach into a teal organization, becoming the first company to implement a holacracy management system in Saudi Arabia. Every year during the holy month of Ramadan, we give back to our community by offering daily talks and workshops that embrace different values. We call it the Katen, which means the charity of knowledge. And for this year, we decided our theme was going to be humanity. Because of everything that's happening with the pandemic, we need some humanity back to our roots. So thank you for being a part of our charity of knowledge tonight. And let me introduce more about our speaker, Coach Lisa Tilstra. So who's Coach Lisa? Lisa's work includes training, facilitation, coaching, and managing a small real estate investment company. She loves helping other people to learn about themselves and how to improve their relationships both at work and at home. Lisa loves variety that shows up in her work and her hobbies, which include paragliding, hiking, and reading. She also loves to connect with people and loves to share ideas and knowledge. So before we get started, I just want to share some concerns. I would love for everyone to go and grab a paper and a pen so that we can start our webinar. And also you have the chat box and the Q&A box. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. And if you introduce yourself, let us know more about yourself in the chat box. Also, we have tech support today. My colleague Tawfiq will be there. So thank you, everyone. And Lisa, the space is yours.
Thank you so much, Leila. And hello, I feel honored and privileged to be part of this special Ramadan program, Charity of Knowledge. Thank you to CoReach, the beautiful team at CoReach. Thank you to Reem. And thank you to each of you for taking time out of your day to be here. Leila, thank you for the kind introduction. I lived in Riyadh for 2 years, and so I feel especially close to those of you who are in Riyadh and miss my friends from there. So again, it's an honor and a privilege to join you today. I am interested to know where each of you are. So if you wouldn't mind, share in the chat box where you're calling in from, and we'll just see where our group comes from. Canada, from Jeddah, from Pakistan, Riyadh, from Riyadh, welcome, from Jeddah. Fantastic. Wonderful. I am currently in the United States. There's somebody from Utah, also in the US. I'm currently in Ohio, spending some time at my brother's house. Wonderful. Some more from Riyadh. Thank you so much for joining. I feel connected to each other, no matter where we are in the world. I love the theme of humanity that CoReach has chosen for this year's Ramadan program. And it's wonderful to be connected. And I think, as Leila said, especially in this very difficult and strange time that we're experiencing with the pandemic. So it's nice to know that wherever we are in the world, we are truly connected by our humanity. So today we're going to talk about uncovering the power of compassion. And there's 2 main thoughts that I want to share with you today. First is introducing this idea of self-compassion, and maybe it's not new for some of you. But I want to talk about how self-compassion can actually help us to be more compassionate with others. And then secondly, I want to share a strategy that combines self-compassion and minimalism to make lasting change. As Layla mentioned, I'd like for you to have a piece of paper and a pencil, pen, a marker, crayon. It doesn't need to be fancy, but just something that's handy so that you can write a few things down as we go through the session. So again, if you need to just grab that, go ahead and grab that and have that. To mix it up a little bit and take my slides down and share my slides again in a few minutes. But as we begin right now, I want to invite you to just pause and take a nice deep breath in. And as you breathe out, let your shoulders relax. Take another nice deep breath. Maybe breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, nice and slowly. Take another deep breath in. And now squeeze it out as you exhale. Just exhale as long as you can and maybe let your stomach squeeze in so it squeezes all the air out of your lungs. Exhale, exhale. And then feel how good it feels to take a nice deep breath in. Let your lungs fill with air again. As you breathe out, just let yourself relax. Let your arms relax. If you're sitting in a chair, just let your body relax in that chair where you are. Each of us come from our lives. We're busy. There are things on our to-do list. There are people who want our attention. There are tasks that need to be done. And I want to invite you just to set those things aside for our time together today. And I guarantee they will all be there in an hour when we finish up. So don't worry, they will be there and they will be waiting for you. And now, as you breathe, if you feel comfortable, just close your eyes for a moment. And as you breathe in and out, just nice and relaxed, I want you to think of someone or something that you feel grateful for. So just continue to breathe nice and relaxed and think of someone or something that you feel grateful for. And just picture that person or that thing in your mind and say silently to yourself, thank you. Thank you. Now, if your eyes are closed, go ahead and open your eyes and look around the room, wherever you are, look around the space. And just take a nice deep breath in. Relax, breath out. And as you breathe out, just maybe whisper softly, thank you. We are alive, we are together, and we are grateful. Humanity is a beautiful gift. And so I just want to thank you for sharing your humanity with me today. 3.5 years ago, I had recently moved to the Netherlands. Now, the Netherlands is a beautiful, quiet country, and my house was in a neighborhood that felt like a park. There were gorgeous green trees. There was a pond and there were ducks, and in the springtime, ducks were having their babies. There were great blue herons who would fly in. Flowers were planted in everyone's yard. It was really quite idyllic. I lived in this beautiful place, but for some reason inside, I felt discouraged and I felt sad. And to be honest, I wasn't quite sure why. I lived in such a beautiful place, and yet inside, I felt sad and discouraged. And I noticed that there was one particular thought that was present almost all the time in my mind. And this thought was, I'm not good enough. I am not good enough. And I wasn't sure where this thought came from, but I didn't like it. I knew it wasn't a helpful thought. It held me back. It kept me from putting myself out there and really stretching for my goals. And so I decided to find a counselor and talk to someone and explore this thought. I'm not good enough. So I talked with a counselor for several sessions, and she was wonderful. She was very easy to talk to. She asked great questions, and she really helped me discover many insights about myself. But then she was going to be having a baby, so she was going on maternity leave. And she asked me if I wanted to continue talking with one of her colleagues, but I told her I really preferred to wait until she returned to work after maternity leave. But I asked her, I said, while we take this break and you're away from work, do you have a couple of books that you might recommend? Based on what you know of me, based on our conversations that we had, what would you recommend that I read? I had no idea that my life would be forever changed. Self-Compassion was one of the books that she assigned to me. That was the title, Self-Compassion. Now, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that I ever used that term, self-compassion, before I saw it on the cover of a book. It sounded easy enough. It sounded familiar. Okay, compassion, that's a good thing. But I had no idea how little self-compassion I had for myself. My hope for you today is that by the end of our time together, you will either realize that you already have this wonderful trait of self-compassion and you'll use it even more abundantly, or you'll realize that this could be one of the most important additions that you could make to your life. Self-compassion changes our perspectives on ourselves and others, all of humanity. Now, I want you to think about your best friend. Your best friend is someone that you love dearly. You've been through experiences with them. They have come to you for support. You have come to them for support. Probably just thinking about this person puts a smile on your face. I know it does for me as I think about my best friend. Now, you have this person in mind, your best friend, and I want you to imagine that your best friend is sharing a difficult experience with you. See, your friend has been working really hard in their job for the past few years, and they recently applied for a new position in their organization. And it was a job that they were so excited about. And it would be a new challenge, and it would really utilize their skills, and plus it would allow them to develop as a professional. It was the perfect job. But as your friend sits with you just now, they tell you they didn't get the job. And they're upset and they're discouraged and they're feeling pretty down. They tell you, I knew I wouldn't get the job. I probably shouldn't even have applied. Now, think about yourself sitting with your friend, hearing them share this experience. And the paper and pen that you have, I want you to write down some things that you would say to your friend in this moment, okay? So just jot down some ideas that come to mind. What is it that you're going to tell your friend in this moment? Take a moment to write these down on your paper. What words do you say to them? Now, as you think about the words that you would say to them, I want you to also think about how are you feeling toward your friend in this moment. They're sad, they're discouraged, they're frustrated. You're thinking of some things that you're going to say to them. What are you feeling towards them? What are your feelings for them in this moment? And go ahead and write some of those feelings down as well. And I would like to invite you to share in the chat box. Let's start with some of the things that you might say to your friend. And you can keep it short. You can just put in a couple of words. You don't have to write a full sentence or even a full paragraph. But just go ahead and put in the chat box, what are some of the things that came to mind? You are the best. You can do it. I love you. Yeah, words of encouragement. Something better is waiting for you. A door closes, another one's going to open. This too shall pass. Oh, there's an inner power in you. You are too much for them. Yeah. So these are words of kindness and compassion. You're telling them it's okay. You love them. You care for them. There's something better yet to come. Now, if you would, share some of the feelings that you have towards your friend, also in the chat box. Just go ahead and share the feelings that you have. Love, concern, care, worry, empathy. Yeah, empathy and love. You're worried for them. Yes. Maybe frustration, really feeling sad, feeling sorry for their experience, feeling care, feeling safe. I love that. Yeah, feeling empathy, feeling sadness. Feeling trust and belief, feeling support. Yeah. Encouraging them not to judge themselves by that experience. Oh, I value our bond. I love that. What a beautiful thing to say to your friend. Now, I want to give you a different situation. I want you to now imagine that you are the one who applied for a new job in your organization. You've been working very hard. You are very excited about the potential of this position. You feel like it really would be a fantastic fit for you. It would use your skills. It would challenge you. You'd have to develop more. You would really enjoy the challenges. And so you applied for this job, but you just found out you did not get it. And you, right now, unfortunately, you're alone. And I just want you to think for a moment, what are some things that you know you would say to yourself in that moment? And I want to tell you right now, these are private thoughts. I am not going to ask you to share these thoughts in the chat box. I just want you to be really honest with yourself and think, what might I say to myself when I found out I didn't get this job that I really, really wanted to get? Think about what thoughts you might have come to your mind, what things you might say to yourself in this moment. And not necessarily what you should say to yourself, but what you really say to yourself in this moment. Yeah. And I'm going to ask you to answer a question here in a moment. And Layla's going to put up a question for us. And I want you to compare the things that you said to your friend and the things that you said to yourself. And I just want you to identify, are they the same or are they different? So you identified some really beautiful things that you would say to your friend. And then you thought about what are some things I might say to myself if I was really discouraged and sad and upset. And are they the same or are they different? And you can actually answer this in this poll. And just take a moment and answer. Those were the same. I would say the same things to my friend as I said to myself, or they were different. Different things. I noticed different things that I would say to my friend than I would say to myself. So take a moment to answer that question on your screens.
Lisa, would you like me to share the results when they're done?
That would be great, Leila.
Okay.
So we'll just give you time to answer that question. So this is interesting as we look at these results. Some of you would say the same things. 83% of us, I answered this poll and said it's different. We said we'd answer it differently. So this is quite interesting. Some of the things that I would, actually, one more question before I share what I would say to myself. I would like to know, there's another question that's going to pop up on your screen. Do you find that you are harder on yourself than on your friend, or harder on your friend than yourself? Which one are you more likely to be? Are you harder on yourself than your friend, or harder on your friend than yourself? And go ahead and answer that question and just submit your answer. Give you a moment to answer and submit those, and then Leila will share the results of this question as well. So interesting. Leila, thank you for sharing these results. 97% of us are harder on ourselves than our friends. And I certainly fall in that category. I think about some of the things that I say to myself when I have a big disappointment like that. I'll say, oh, I knew I couldn't do it. I'm just not smart enough. I can't believe I said that in the interview. That was such a stupid thing to say. I can't believe I messed it up so bad. I shouldn't have even tried. I knew I wasn't ready, right? And these are some things that I say to myself. For some reason, it seems like for many of us, we are harder on ourselves than we would ever be on our friends. We say things to ourselves that we would never say to someone we love. You're so stupid. Why can't you do anything right? Oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm never going to be good enough. These are things that I would never say to my friend, my loved ones. And yet I find that I can say them to myself. Kristen Neff, in the book Self-Compassion, shares this thought. Insecurity, anxiety, and depression are incredibly common in our society, and much of this is due to self-judgment, to beating ourselves up when we feel we aren't winning in the game of life. Now, the game of life is intense, right? It doesn't feel like a game at all. We say that, right, with quotes, the game of life. We often beat ourselves up, though, when we feel like we're not succeeding, we're not achieving the way that we want to. And I feel like it's even more intense with all of our technology. Now, I love so much about technology. There's wonderful and amazing aspects about our technology and our social media. And there's also a lot of pressure. I have to post just the right picture with just the right filter. And oh, I've got to write something that sounds smart and reflective and funny and serious. And I have to make sure I get all the right hashtags. There's a lot of pressure. How many of you have found yourself agonizing over an Instagram post? Is that the right word? No, should I change it? There's a lot of pressure. And part of what this does is it creates this space where we are in constant comparison of ourselves with others. And we're constantly looking and we're saying, how pretty am I? How strong am I? How funny am I? How skinny am I? How well dressed am I? How smart am I? How smart are my kids? The list can go on and on and on. And sometimes to protect ourselves from this pressure, we can maybe develop a bit of a false sense of self-esteem. We might look in the mirror and we say, I am beautiful, or I am handsome. I'm so smart. I'm smarter than all those other people. I can do anything I want. And yet, sometimes what happens is that we actually become more critical of others to feel better about ourselves. So sometimes we have to put other people down to make ourselves feel better. Oh, did you see the shoes she was wearing? Can you believe that she wore those in public? Did you see what a fool he made of himself? He really needs to give it up, right? And we can put other people down in a way that makes us feel better. But putting other people down, it can create a temporary relief from negative feelings we have about ourselves, but it is temporary and it is fleeting. And self-esteem is not the same as self-compassion. I have found that self-compassion is much more powerful and positive than self-esteem in my life. Let's look at compassion, right? Before we turn it to the self-compassion, let's just look at compassion for a moment. Compassion literally means to suffer together. The researchers that study compassion define compassion as the feeling arising when you're confronted with another's suffering and you feel motivated to relieve that suffering. So when you listen to your friend who's upset and disappointed about not getting the job, you see that they are suffering and you feel motivated to relieve that suffering by saying the beautiful things that you said. You would say, I'm so sorry, you can do better. There's going to be more chances. They didn't see your talents. They're not worth your energy. Let's move on. There's going to be more opportunities. You're motivated to relieve that suffering. That is compassion. That is compassion. Now, while it is socially acceptable, and really many of us are taught to have the sense of compassion for others, what about for ourselves? What about for ourselves? Self-compassion. Now, I'm the type of person that enjoys personal growth, personal development, and I've read a lot of books. I've watched a lot of webinars. I've attended conferences and gone to workshops. And these books and workshops and seminars have been filled with amazing ideas, wonderful speakers. But honestly, I have been changed by this idea of self-compassion. I've been changed more than all of the other ideas and books and programs combined. Now, first of all, I didn't even realize that this was a concept. Like consciously, I didn't ever think about self-compassion before my counselor said, here, read this book. Now, I think of myself as an empathetic and a compassionate person. I love people. It's very easy for me to listen and provide care. I love that connection with other people. But to have compassion for myself, like, what does that even mean? And isn't, even by its very nature, isn't compassion about someone else? But Dr. Kristen Neff really helped me discover compassion is extremely powerful when it's directed inward. And I have never been the same since learning about this. Self-compassion is turning that understanding of suffering toward oneself. And ironically, this is not selfish. It's just as compassionate as turning my understanding of suffering to my friend. It opens the door for me to recognize when I am suffering, when I'm in pain, when I am going through a difficult time, and when I need support. And it's been interesting to realize that as I have begun to have more compassion for myself, I notice I have even more compassion for others. Now, there are 3 elements of self-compassion that I want to look at with you just briefly today. And these 3 elements are self-kindness versus self-judgment, common humanity versus isolation, and mindfulness versus over-identification. So let's look at the first one, self-kindness versus self-judgment. I want you to look back at the things that you wrote down at the beginning, the things that you wrote down that you said, I would say these to my friend who is upset and discouraged and frustrated. Look at those words that you wrote down. Read over those again. And now imagine saying those exact same things to yourself. Look back at the feelings you had towards your friend, the feelings of concern and care and love. Imagine having those exact same feelings toward yourself when you were the one that didn't get the job. What would that look like? Does it feel strange to even imagine that? Honestly, if you're anything like me, it feels strange. It feels a little uncomfortable. I'm not really sure. Is that okay? If I like, of course, I would say those nice things to my friend. Of course I would. But to myself, I don't know. If I say those things to myself, maybe I'm just going to get lazy. And don't I need to push myself? Don't I need to, really motivate myself? Ironically, research shows that self-compassion or self-kindness is actually more motivational than self-judgment. And this is a shift in thinking. It certainly has been for me to say, wait a minute, if I'm nice to myself, it's going to be more motivational than if I have to be tough. I have to be firm with myself. I have to, get myself out there, go at it again. And actually, the research says self-kindness and self-compassion is more motivational than self-judgment. The second element of self-compassion is common humanity versus isolation. Now, here's what I have found. When I am going through a difficult time, I feel alone. I feel like nobody understands. Nobody is going through a hard time like me. No one else suffers like I do. No one will get it. But this is a lie. And I'm not really sure why my brain tells me this lie. But if your brain ever tells you this lie, that you're alone and nobody gets it and nobody would understand, you are not alone. You are not alone. This is the thing. We are all human. We have a common human experience, whether we're from the US or Saudi Arabia or Argentina or Germany or Indonesia or Australia or South Africa. Yes, okay, there's differences, but when we get below the superficial differences, there is common humanity. And it's interesting, for the last 8 years of my life, I've lived outside of the US. I've lived in the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, the Netherlands, France. And oftentimes when I come back to the US, I have friends and family who don't travel as much, and they often ask me, well, what's it like? Is it hard? Is it challenging? What are the people like? Is it strange? And I'll share a few of the insights. It was always interesting to share when I lived in Saudi Arabia. Women could not drive. Very excited that that has changed since I've lived there. But I would tell them, oh, I couldn't drive. I had to wear an abaya and different things that are different than we're used to in the US. But very quickly, no matter what country I was thinking about and describing, I would say, you know what I find everywhere I go? The people are just people. We're connected by the same dreams and desires in life, and wishes for our family and our children, and we have more in common than we have different. At the core, we are all humans, and we're in this life together. We suffer together. We rejoice together. We love together. We cry together. And I have learned that when my brain tells me I'm alone in my suffering, the best thing I can do is call a friend and talk with them about what's going on for me and listen to what's going on for them. And immediately I know I'm not alone. We are together in our humanity. We are not in isolation. And self-compassion moves me out of isolation into a place of common humanity. And there's comfort and there's connection in our humanity. This third element of self-compassion, mindfulness versus over-identification. This means finding the delicate balance of recognizing and acknowledging negative emotions without exaggerating them. Now, I'll be honest with you, I find this a little bit difficult. I either tend to want to push away and suppress negative emotions. No, I shouldn't feel that way. I just need to get over it. Or I get caught up in them and I get overwhelmed by them and I can get stuck. And so finding a balance of being mindful, being aware that maybe I'm feeling sad, maybe I'm feeling a little depressed right now, I'm feeling discouraged, and yet not letting those overwhelm me and take control. This is this balance here of mindfulness versus over-identification. And I'm not going to spend much time here, but I will tell you that this is a part of self-compassion that I find I need lots of practice. And I have found it helpful to talk with a friend, perhaps even with a coach or a counselor with this, to really help me develop finding this balance between mindfulness and over-identification. So I'd encourage you, as you see these three elements of self-compassion, to think about which element would be most useful for you to maybe focus on and practice in your life, which would make a positive impact. And for each of us, it might be a little bit of a different element. For me, it was a combination of the first two that really helped me kind of step into this idea and start practicing self-compassion. Now we're going to shift just slightly, and I want to check in with Layla. Are there some questions? Would now be a good time to maybe pause and see if there are some questions before
Yeah, we do have 2 questions. First question is from Sarah. She's asking, how do we know that we are not confusing self-compassion with just an excuse to be lazy or even self-indulgence?
That is a great question. And I think part of that comes with being honest with ourselves. Because sometimes I just want to be lazy. that's the reality. I just want to be lazy and I want to stay in bed and not get up and not do the things that I need to do. And that's something that I need to recognize. Um, for me, self-compassion, remember that definition of compassion, suffering together, recognizing, seeing suffering in someone else and feeling motivation to relieve that suffering. That is, it's something different. So compassion involves some sort of action. I'm going to say something to help my friend feel better. I'm going to give my friend a hug. I'm going to, offer words of understanding. I'm going to listen, right? And with self-compassion, I might offer those same things to myself, right? I might say the words of encouragement to myself, and not as an excuse to just be lazy and not do something, but really in an effort of relieving the suffering. Because when the suffering is relieved, think about your friend. After you've finished talking with them, they might feel motivated then to, you know what, you're right. There's more opportunities out there. I'm going to go look for another job. I'm going to apply for something else. I'm going to go talk to the manager of this position and ask, what could I do next time to do better, right? So there's actually action that takes place after that. And I find that is true also for self-compassion. And I can recognize, hey, this is a really difficult situation that I'm experiencing. And when I recognize that, I can sometimes then have the space to take action afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. We have another question from Ahmed Kamal. May I ask for the divination for both elements in mindfulness?
I'm going to just look at that question. Can I ask for a little clarification of what and
I'm sorry, Lisa, your voice isn't clear. Can you just make sure your mic is
yeah,
not, yeah.
clear what the question is regarding the both elements in mindfulness. I'm not sure how I can best answer that question. So if
Can you please ask your question or just give us more details, please?
that would be great.
Okay. Another question is, can you share with us from Manal, how can we wait, where did it go? Okay. How can we differentiate between isolation and to begin in solitude to manifest mindfulness?
That's a great question. I think also with similar to what I had shared with, how do we know if we're just being lazy or having self-compassion? For myself, when I put myself in isolation, I really feel like I'm alone in the world. Nobody understands. And it's not a voluntary thing that I want. I want somebody to understand, but I feel like nobody gets it. And so isolation moves us away from humanity. And with in solitude, I might choose to spend some time alone for my own personal growth, for my spiritual reflection, perhaps. There's different practices that involve solitude and being alone. But that's more of a choice that I make to take that action versus feeling overwhelmed and oppressed by nobody understands me, nobody gets me. So the isolation is more of a negative experience, where the solitude can be quite a positive experience that we usually take by choice. It's a great question.
Great. We have one more that says, what is the difference between self-empathy and self-compassion and self-confidence?
Great question. So there's lots of different definitions between empathy and compassion. So I'll start with those two, self-empathy, self-compassion. And you can read different things about these, but often people agree that empathy is when I can recognize and identify the emotions that someone else is experiencing. So I might say to my friend, this sounds like such a difficult and frustrating experience for you. I can understand that you would be so upset. You worked so hard to get this job. I'm expressing empathy. Now, you could also say, well, there's some compassion there as well. And they're closely tied together. So it sometimes can be a little difficult to separate out the two. But one of the differentiating factors that many people talk about is that compassion moves us to action. Empathy might be something where I can just say something empathic to my friend and feel better, say it to myself as well. Compassion tends to move us to some sort of action to help relieve that suffering. That's the goal. And with self-confidence, it's really, it's a sense of internally feeling like, okay, I can do this. I can look, the way I tend to think about self-confidence, I want to be realistic with myself, and I want to recognize, you know what, I have certain strengths. And as humans, we all have strengths, and we all have certain weaknesses. And when I have a healthy self-confidence, I can say, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. Now, I feel confident moving into this position, looking at both of those. I don't have to feel terrible about myself because I'm not great at everything. I can just recognize, okay, well, I'm not great at these things, but these are the things that I'm really good at, and I'm going to focus on those. So to me, self-confidence is more of looking at ourselves objectively and feeling positive about ourselves in light of both our strengths and our weaknesses. Great questions.
Great. Just to go back to that question that we needed clarification on. So he meant, may I ask for the definition for both elements in mindfulness?
In mindfulness. Yeah, let me go back. Mindfulness versus over-identification, these two elements.
Yeah, I think that's what he meant.
So in this case, we're really looking quite simply at mindfulness and aware. So when I'm experiencing an emotion, some people would call this emotional self-awareness. I can recognize I feel sad right now, or I feel angry about a certain situation, or I feel very frustrated about this. And I just notice it and I'm aware. This is the feeling that I'm experiencing. So this is a sort of mindfulness. Over-identification means that feeling, I become it. I am angry at everybody around me. I might be so sad that it leads to some sort of situational depression or longer time of depression where it really impacts my ability to function well in my life because I identify it with it too much. It becomes all I experience versus just, yeah, I'm feeling sad about this, or this consumes my life and it prevents me from being able to function in a normal and healthy way. So fantastic questions.
Great, thank you so much.
I teach a leadership course that is built on 7 principles. And these 7 principles of leadership, the first one is a principle that we call moving from me to we. Now, this idea of moving from me to we, this is about shifting perspective. It's a paradigm shift. Perhaps you've heard that term before. It's a way that the way we think about something, the way we see something, the way we understand something changes significantly. So what we once thought, we don't think that anymore. We think something very different. We see things through a different lens. And self-compassion has created a paradigm shift for me. So let me share what I mean. Remember the reason that I started talking with a counselor in the Netherlands? It was because I had this voice in my head that kept saying, I'm not good enough. And this voice was negative and it was nagging. And this voice made me feel sad, made me feel depressed. I felt angry with myself. I even disliked myself. Why couldn't I be good enough? I desperately wanted to be good enough. And I tried telling myself, I am good enough. But no matter how many times I told myself I was good enough, that voice was still there, and it was stronger. It was hard. And so I began to have compassion for myself and my experience. And using self-compassion, I began to say things to myself like, wow, it's really hard to think you're not good enough. That's a very strong voice you have in your head, Lisa, and it's hard work to try and change it. It makes sense that you would feel sad and angry when you hear that voice. I entered into my own suffering, and I stopped telling myself that I shouldn't think that way. Now, interestingly enough, having compassion for myself did not stop that voice. In fact, that voice still speaks to me even now, tells me I'm not good enough, tells me I don't have anything valuable to say, I'm not important enough to share my perspectives. But here's where the paradigm shift begins. It's not about being good enough. It's about being human. It's a shift from me to we. I am human. I have struggles. I have successes. I have days where I feel like I can conquer the world. And I have days where I barely feel like getting out of bed. I'm human. But who can measure my humanness? Who can tell me if I'm good enough? And who am I even looking to for that measurement? Only myself. And then I step into this idea of I'm human. And I have my ups and downs. And I start to feel softer and kinder toward myself. And this is where it becomes really powerful for me, because I also begin to feel softer and kinder towards other humans in my life. They have their ups and downs. They make mistakes. They don't always get it right. They are human. They have struggles. They have successes. They have days where they feel like they can conquer the world, and they have days where they barely feel like getting out of bed. They are human. And in our humanity, it doesn't need to be a race about being the best. Who can be better? Who can be good enough? Good enough for who? Good enough for what? We are human. And that voice telling me that I'm not good enough remains. It might always be there. I don't know. And it's hard to have that voice. I hope that you don't have a voice telling you you're not good enough. But if you do, you can be assured you are not alone. You are human. You have struggles. You have successes. You have days where you feel like you can conquer the world, and you likely have days where you barely feel like getting out of bed. You are human. I am human. We are human. And wow, there is such beautiful, amazing power in that reality. It brings us together in compassion and connectedness, and it creates space for us all. I want to take a moment for some reflection. And I'm going to pause because I've said a lot. And I'm going to invite you to think about what you've heard and what stands out to you. And I want you to think about what you're feeling right now. And I'm going to ask you to take that paper and pen or pencil, and maybe you'll turn it over to the other side where it's empty. But I want to invite you to draw a picture that represents how you're feeling right now. And for some of you, this will come very easy and you're already starting to sketch and you like these sorts of things. For others of you, you might feel oh, I don't know what that means. How do I draw what I'm feeling? I relate to you if you're feeling that way. Whenever I'm told to draw what you're feeling, I'm like, I don't know what to do. So if you feel that way, first of all, have compassion for yourself. I would just invite you to pick up the pen or pencil, whatever you have, and just start moving it on the page. And it doesn't matter if it's just circles or squiggles or lines, whatever it is, just start moving it and just start seeing what comes. It doesn't have to be a masterful picture. It could just be shapes and see what comes. And I'm going to do the same here, and we're just going to take maybe a minute and a half, not that long, and see what happens. Reflect on what you're feeling right now. Just let your pen or pencil move. See what comes. You might still be drawing. Hopefully you're seeing something emerge on the page. I will share my picture with you here. And I had no idea what was going to come out on the page. I thought, oh, what am I going to draw? But this is what came. It started with the heart. And then I feel embraced by all of you. And I feel a deep sense of gratitude and love being connected. And some of you are already doing it, but I want to invite you to maybe share in the chat box what you drew or what it was like to draw. So it's a heart, some hearts, an empty tree. Thank you for sharing. More hearts, a glowing feather. Wow, I'd love to be able to see all of your pictures. A happy face. I love it. Maybe afterwards you can share those by email or post them to social media. A bear hug, squares inside squares, a locked safe. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing those. Someone says, oh, I don't want to share mine. Circle all scribbled inside. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, as we bring our time to a close, I want to share one more practical thing with you. And this is how self-compassion can be combined with the concept of minimalism to really help us create lasting change. And this is not the kind of minimalism where you have to go clean out your closet unless you want to, and then that can be part of your goals. But I have found that when I set goals for myself, I often have difficulty following through. If you can relate, first of all, have compassion for yourself. It's tough to follow through on goals. We have good intentions and we start off energized and excited, and then life happens, and before we know it, we're off track, we're off schedule, we're discouraged, and we pretty much give up. So recently, I completed a 30-day yoga challenge. Sounds impressive, right? Wow, 30 days of yoga, 15 to 30 minutes minutes a day of yoga. Now, the instructor was very cheerful, just used YouTube videos. She was easy to follow, even though I'm not really experienced with yoga. And I finished just a few weeks ago on April 15th. So you might think, oh, okay, well, you started in the middle of March and you finished in the middle of April. However, I didn't tell you when I started this 30-day challenge. I actually started the 30-day challenge on January 1st. And now you don't have to be a math genius to know there are more than 30 days from January 1st to April 15th. In fact, there's 105 days. I counted them. And when I first started this 30-day challenge, the 1st of January, I had every intention to complete it at the end of January. 30 days of yoga. I would be done. The first few days went perfectly. And then I had a trip and a day of travel. And so I missed a day, but not to worry, one day missed, it's okay. But then 2 days later, I missed again, and then again, and life started throwing these different curveballs at me and things I couldn't really control. And it was nearly impossible to fit in my yoga. So I didn't. And I pretty much gave up. I thought, well, I'll start again in February. Why not? But then I realized I have a lot of trips in February too. So what am I going to do? Yoga kept getting pushed off and pushed off. But then about the second week of February, I decided, you know what? I'm just going to keep moving forward. I'm just going to go with the 30-day program. And I think at that point I was on day 9 or 10. So I was like, well, just do the next session whenever you can. Just do that. So I said, okay, as long as I'm getting it done, it doesn't matter if it's all done in January. Life is hectic right now, and it's hard, right? It's hard when you don't have a schedule. So do you notice what I was doing? I was being kind to myself. I was practicing self-compassion there. And on April 15th, I had a really surprising experience. I was very excited about completing my 30th day of yoga. I was really happy about making it to the end of my 30-day challenge. And I did not expect to feel as good about it as I did. I thought it would be, well, whatever, I finished it, but it's April 15th. But I felt fantastic. I was like, yes, I finished it. And I learned something in this process. Self-compassion creates motivation to keep moving forward with my goals, even if it's just one tiny step at a time. Now, it's tempting to set goals that are really big and audacious. And in fact, there are courses you can take and motivational speakers who will encourage you, set the biggest goals possible for your life, shoot for the moon. And when I hear these speakers talk and I take those classes myself, I get really excited and I make these big goals. But what I've found is that in everyday life, it's really tough to make those big and audacious goals a reality. It's tough to stick with them day in and day out. But if I look at a goal and then try to be a minimalist about that goal, I have more success. So being a minimalist with my goals means I think about the smallest amount I need to do to move in the direction of the goal. So I wanted to complete a 30-day yoga challenge. Big and audacious goal says 30-day challenge, it has to be done in 30 days. But a minimalist goal says complete the 30 days in however many days it takes. 38, 49, 105, just complete it. And this has opened up a chance for me to learn that surprisingly, setting minimalist goals creates motivation. I felt more motivated at the end to start another challenge without having that pressure of it's got to be just right. It has to be just perfect. I felt just as much success completing my 30 days of yoga in 105 days as I felt when I have done the challenge in 30 days. And I've done some where 30 days in 30 days. it surprised me. And it created another paradigm shift for me. It's that first step. It's that small step. It's the one that's closest to us. That minimalist goal. That's the one that can truly change our world. And I'm going to finish today by sharing a poem with you. It's a poem called Start Close In by David White. And I'll invite you just to relax where you are. I'm just going to read this out loud to you. So feel free to close your eyes if you want. This is a poem, Start Close In. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take. Start with the ground you'd know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way to begin the conversation. Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple. To hear another's voice, follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes an intimate ear that can really listen to another. Start right now. Take a small step you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start close in. Don't mistake that other for your own. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take. It has been an honor and a privilege to spend this time with you. And I would just like to say thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing in our common humanity. And I'm gonna turn it back over to Layla here, and we have more time for questions. And I would love also just to hear your comments, reflections that you'd like to share, as well as any questions that you have. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We do have a couple of questions, but before we go, I genuinely wanted to share something and how this whole talk has just been a complete shift mentally and internally for me. And I wanted to share with everyone how in the beginning of the talk, when me and Lisa were having our practice session, I actually expressed how nervous I was and that I didn't want to ruin or misspell her last name. And she just simply told me, Layla, just have self-compassion, and this is all about self-compassion. And I genuinely felt your energy, and I felt your spirit while you're talking and while you're expressing. It was truly, truly amazing. And I wish we can just go on with the whole entire talk. I love it. And let me get back to the questions so that people, you would answer people's questions. So we have a couple of questions. The first one was from Noura. She's asking, or she's mentioning, I was so compassionate about myself and I felt strong from the inside, and it was amazing until I lost it 2 years ago. What are the best techniques to feel it back again? There's a shift in interest in work, of the environment, and ethics can affect your self-compassion, and you might lose it.
So thank you so much for sharing that question. And I think I have also experienced what you're describing, where you feel like you're in a space of self-compassion and you feel strong from that, and then you lose it. And it absolutely can be related to what's going on in our lives, excuse me, in the lives of our loved ones. It can be in related to our environment. And we can be under a lot of stress and pressure, and we really do lose that. And I think thinking about it as a practice, this is not something that we achieve. Okay, I have achieved self-compassion and now everything is wonderful. It's a continual learning process. And it's been just over 3 years for me of my journey of learning about self-compassion and reading the book, which the title is Self-Compassion, and Kristen Neff is the author. If anyone's interested in that book, I recommend it. But it can be, I mean, I think the first step of getting it back is what you just did, is recognizing, oh, I was in a space where I had this self-compassion and I'm no longer there. And have compassion for yourself, because there's a reason. And even though you may not right now be able to identify that reason, there is a reason. So to be compassionate and kind to yourself in that. And it might involve some conversations with a trusted friend. For me, it involved talking with a counselor who helped me get back to that space. Sometimes there's a coach in your life that you might talk to, but really, again, connecting with other people on a journey, I find for myself that continues to be so important for me.
Great, thank you so much. So while we take more questions, I just want to launch a poll we would love to hear more about what you guys think, and your feedback is very important to us. So we'll take more questions while you guys answer the following poll. So let's move on to another question. One of the questions is, I'm afraid that self-compassion is going to make me away from my self-realization journey. Is it that ironic, or is it normal to feel that way?
It's very normal to feel that way. I felt that myself. My friends who I talk to about some self-compassion often just don't even want to hear about it. They're like, no, I can't be compassionate with myself. I have to be hard on myself and push myself along. And this is something that is backed up by research. And so the book Self-Compassion, Kristen Neff is a professor, and she does research projects where she compares, is it more motivational to have self-compassion or not? And so there's research that you can read, and you can back this up to encourage you and to try and help give you support there, because it's very normal to feel that way and to worry, if I relax, if I'm kind to myself, maybe I stop moving along my self-realization journey, as you said. But ironically, that self-compassion can actually create more motivation for us. So I would encourage you to try it out, to get the book, read the research, and please, anyone who's listening is welcome to reach out and talk with me about it as well. So it's a great question.
Thank you so much. Another question says, won't minimalism turn our goals into procrastination?
Well, it is possible. It is possible. I will not promise you that it won't. And, it relates back to one of the questions earlier where, like, how do we know, right? Is this me being lazy, or is this me having self-compassion? And a lot of that, only I can answer that question truly for myself. And I speak to you as someone who, I tend to be a procrastinator, but not just a procrastinator. Sometimes I work more efficiently under pressure. And so some of us really do work more efficiently in the last minute, and it can feel like procrastination. With my experience recently with the 30-day yoga challenge, there were so many different things going on in my life that I couldn't control them. I didn't have control over so many elements that were preventing me from moving along towards my goal. And so by letting go of that desire for perfection, if it's a 30-day challenge, I have to do it in 30 days. It allowed me to keep moving towards that goal and eventually getting there. So some goals that we set have very set time frames, and then we may not be able to just let it go on for 105 days like I did. But I think part of that really comes down to being honest with ourselves. Are we really just procrastinating, or are there elements of our life that we don't have control over? And so we're going to work within our life the best we can, have compassion that it is challenging, and keep moving. Just keep that movement, even if it's one small step at a time, moving forward.
Great, thank you so much for that. So we have another question that says, why is it that we have that voice, I'm not good enough?
That is a great question. And I wish that I had a direct answer for you. In my own experience of talking with a counselor, I would say it's I haven't found a simple answer even for myself. Why do I have that voice? I think it's complicated. And I wish I could say, oh yes, here's why I figured it out and now I can move on and I don't have that voice. I would encourage you to explore that. And I found one of the most difficult questions my counselor ever asked me was, where does that voice come from? And I was like, I don't know, but we talked about a lot of different things. And, to be willing to ask yourself, where does that come from? With a real sense of curiosity, without judgment. And there's things that happen in our childhood, things that we don't have control over that impact us as adults. And so, I'd encourage you, and maybe it is to ask a counselor to help you process through that. I know that's been really useful in my life. But it is something that I think for each of us is probably a little different. And again, there's, in my experience, at least I found there's not a simple answer to that, but it has been a valuable journey to just ask that question of myself without feeling scared of what I might find and discover there.
Yeah, that's definitely very true. Thank you for that. Another, we have two more questions. One is, can you please share with us the name of the book? So I can, if you can, Lisa, please type it down in the chat box.
Yes.
So people can just have.
So the book is called Self-Compassion. Let me make sure this is going to everyone. It's by Kristen Neff. She also has a TED Talk if you want to just listen to her TED Talk to get started. But I do recommend the book. It's quite easy to read, even though she's sharing her research. She shares also her own personal journey and how self-compassion has impacted her. And I really appreciated her authenticity of sharing that in the book as well, and her own story. So I do recommend it.
Great, thank you. The last question is, can you please tell us again the 3 elements so I can write them down?
Yes, let me go back to that slide that has the 3 elements. Here they are right here. And I'll leave this up.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have one more question. I think that voice of I'm not good enough may come from the strength finder, strength called responsibility. Is my guess making sense?
Wow, so that's really interesting to reflect on. And I think it does make sense. And it would be really interesting to explore and find, what I would say is, I know for myself, and I'll only speak for myself, to find that balance of taking responsibility to, because I'm a pretty driven person. I like to improve myself. And so I like to think of myself as, taking responsibility as well. And if that ever tips into, if that voice of I'm not good enough starts to decrease my motivation to take responsibility, then for me, it becomes a problem. If I find that it is motivating and it's pushing me towards my goals, then maybe it's not a problem. But if it does tip over into that place of, in the case for me, it was really causing me to feel discouraged and feel depressed and sad. And it was holding me back from really stepping out and taking risks and opportunities. So I think that's the question to ask for yourself. And if it's not holding you back, then it might be, a voice that drives you forward. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. I completely relate to that, having responsibility as one of my strengths. I do see the relation and thinking you're not good enough with having so much responsibility to hold when it comes to a lot of stuff. So yeah. Great. Great. So this is the end of our Q&A session. If you guys have any more questions, please let us know. Thank you so much, Lisa, for your insights and for your amazing energy. I truly, truly, truly appreciated it, and I'm sure everyone else did. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending and for being a part of tonight's Charity of Knowledge. And we are looking forward to so many more nights and to so much more to share with everyone.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor and a privilege to be with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's our pleasure and it's our complete honor too. Thank you so much. Great. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you tomorrow, inshallah.